Well, 4 days after President Kennedy
Isn't this more of a Rumble stream than YouTube? Yo, what's up? Welcome everyone, I'm here. No camera today, if that's okay with you. Because I'm chilling, I just wanted to show you, like, something really incredible. Like, really incredible. That's gonna fuck you up. I'm telling you. I'm gonna show you the man behind JFK that no one knows about. And no one talks about. But the guy that told JFK about this global conspiracy, he had a speech. And that speech is 1 hour long. It's from 1961. And he basically is Jewish. And he left his own religion and tried to educate everyone on it. Before he died, obviously. And then he told JFK about it. JFK went live and he gave that famous speech about the global conspiracy, but he didn't say it so directly like Freedman. So we're gonna listen to Benjamin Freedman after listening to JFK himself. I know that the screen is dark, by the way. I'm sorting it. Yeah, this is gonna be cinema. Okay, before we go through this though, I want to show you one thing which is very interesting. So you already know that the Jews have the prophecy of 9/11 and Bin Laden and everything in their religion, right? So I play it one more time, just to refreshen you.
Names of these days is Bin Laden. He's a cockroach that got up from where? I don't know from where he came. And he's sowing such destruction all over the world. 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai writes that there will be a man by the name Bin Laden. It's amazing. Not if you go into the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh was written 2,000 years ago.
So now, the interesting part about Bin Laden is that his real name isn't Bin Laden. He changed his name to Bin Laden. Why? Because he needed to change his name to Bin Laden for this prophecy. Their prophecies are all fabricated. They are just rituals.
You don't believe me? Go to Bereshit, Zohar, Bereshit, Perek Vav, Daf Vav, page 6, and Bereshit. And you will see that there is going to be, at the end of times, there will be a man, a person. I mean not a man, he calls him a dog. Who was a dog in heaven, and he came down as a dog, and he took the shape of a human being, and his name is Bin Laden, and he is going to cause tumult all over the world. He will cause wars, and that is at the end of times, Acharit Hayamim. Now, go further to Parashat Vayera, in the Zohar HaKadosh, you will find there an extraordinary information. There will be two big buildings in the land of Edom, which today we relate the word Edom to America. And those are the biggest, the tallest buildings in the world, and they will be they will be brought down completely, and that will be the sign of the beginning of tremendous wars that will end only in the coming of the Mashiach. You know, I'll tell you something. 1 week before, one of the great rabbis in Israel, a Hasidic rabbi, an Admor, he came to visit Rebbe New Square. And he came with some people, some of his disciples in the car, and they were coming towards the evening. He didn't want to lose the time of Mincha, you know, the prayer of the afternoon. So he said, please, can you stop right here? I want to daven, I want to pray Mincha here. They prayed Mincha with Minyan in front of everybody passing in Manhattan. Where? Right there, near the World Center. After he finished the davening, the prayer, he said, say bye-bye to those buildings because you are not going to see them no more.
Okay. So, they have this like in their religion, yeah? So 9/11 is just their ritual. They have done it. And then, numerology is very important for them, remember? I'm gonna show you something very interesting. I already posted one time something about this. But you have to see it again because there is one thing that I didn't let you know. Actually, it is in our Discord as well. Let me pull it up. You see this coin here? It's wrongfully, they say Israeli shekel, but it's not a shekel, okay? Have I just stumbled into an incel stream? Yes, you can just fuck off, you dumb faggot. So anyways, this shekel here, this coin was made in 1968. That was 33 years before 9/11. 33 exactly. Why 33? You can already tell that this is supposed to be the Twin Towers. And this is the airplane that basically crashes into it. And then this symbolizes that they will go to war after this is finished. So the number 33 in Masonry is the master number. Numerology is Jewish, like Jewish numerology. And it also basically indicates that you have something fulfilled. You know, like a change in the world. And that's what the number 3 is standing for. And that's why you also have 33-degree Mason as the maximum number for Gentile people. Very interesting. So now we're gonna listen to JFK and then see what he had to say.
Opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion.
So this is very important. This war is not a war that is like in your face. It's like a silent war. And that's why he's saying it's not in the traditional fashion.
Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe.
Our enemies are advancing around the globe. Who are these globalists? I think you know by now.
The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
So every single person, doesn't matter if they work in the news, in the media, if they are workers, businessmen, people in the government, they need to collectively wake up to this monolith of a global conspiracy of some globalists advancing in a silent war against humanity. Who can that be?
On infiltration instead of invasion,
on infiltration instead of invasion. So they don't attack you, they invade your government and pretend as if they are your leaders, but in reality they are part of those monolith conspiracists. And instead of real elections, you have subversions. You have intimidation instead of free choice.
On subversion instead of elections. On intimidation instead of free choice.
Hello.
On guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine.
So a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, science, politics, every human endeavor. These people are the lead of it in this global conspiracy. And they, you know, they like the Star of David.
That combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match.
Alright, so this is JFK. He got assassinated after giving this speech because he wanted to educate the people on the global conspiracy. If you are a streamer and you want to educate the people on the global conspiracy, you don't get headshotted, but you get deplatformed. If you are a president, then you get killed. So who was the person that advised JFK and explained to him the global conspiracy in detail? The name of that man was Benjamin Freedman. And in 1961, he gave a prediction for the world that the act of 3 world wars will soon be conducted, in which its center of it will be Palestine.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to hear a very frightening speech. This speech is an explanation of the plans now being laid to throw the United States into a 3rd World War. It was made a short time ago before a large group in the congressional room of the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. Both the speech and the question and answer period later so electrified the audience that a group of patriots has transferred it to 2 long-playing records which you may buy to play for friends, clubs, and your church groups in your community. The speaker is Mr. Benjamin Freedman, noted authority on Zionism and all of its schemes. Mr. Freedman is a former Jew, and I mean a former Jew. He has fought the communist world conspiracy tooth and nail and stands today as a leading American patriot. We now take you to the speaker's platform to present Benjamin Freedman.
What I intend to tell you tonight is something that you have never been able to learn from any other source. And what I tell you now concerns not only you, but your children and the survival of this country and Christianity. I'm not here just to dish up a few facts to send up your blood pressure, but I'm here to tell you things that will help you preserve what you consider the most sacred thing in the world, the liberty and the freedom and the right to live as Christians, where you have a little dignity and a little right to pursue the things that your conscience tells you are the right thing as Christians. Now, first of all, I'd like to tell you that on August 25th, 1960, that was shortly before election, Senator Kennedy, who is now the President of the United States, went to New York and delivered an address to the Zionist Organization of America.
So now, check this out. This guy was a Jewish person that is racially Jewish, but he rejects the Jewish religion because he says it's satanic. And then he told him about what they're planning as a world conspiracy, and Kennedy then went on the podium and gave that speech about the global conspiracy. But he will explain to you the global conspiracy in detail, a way that JFK could not say it immediately. What is that? I already explained. Do you have questions? This man here is a Jewish man that betrayed the Jewish people and told JFK about their plans in 1961. Actually, before this speech, he already told him, because he was working with him, and then JFK then started to attack the Jewish movement, the Zionists and stuff like that, because he knew what was going on. Sorry, there was an alarm in my room. I thought it was on stream. Oh, okay.
In that address, to reduce it to its briefest form, he stated that he would use the armed forces of the United States to preserve the existence of the regime set up in Palestine by the Zionists, who are now in occupation of that area. In other words, Christian boys are going to be yanked out of their homes, away from their families, and sent abroad to fight in Palestine against the Christian and Muslim Arabs who merely want to return to their homes. And these Christian boys are going to be asked to shoot to kill these innocent people who only want to follow out 15 resolutions passed by United Nations in the last 12 years, calling upon the Zionists to allow these people to return to their homes. Now, when the United States troops appear in the Middle East to fight with the Zionists as their allies to prevent the return of these people who were evicted from their homes in the 1948 armed insurrection by the Zionists who were transplanted there from Eastern Europe, when that happens, the United States will trigger World War III. You say, when will that take place?
Can you give us details on when did this Jewish corruption has begun? I believe you said it was some part after Egypt. Yeah, after Moses parted the sea and they ended up in Babylon and they wrote the Talmud with the 17 head rabbis. That's when it became Satanism, and that's when it became basically this all-seeing eye and this Freemasonry worshipment of that sun god, and the Messiah that they wanted is not actually was Jesus, but they rejected him, and then now they are just following the Antichrist.
The answer is, as soon as the difficulties between France and Algeria have been settled, that will take place. As soon as France and Algeria have settled their difficulties, and the Arab world or the Muslim world have no more war on their hands with France, they are going to move these people back into their homes. And when they do that, and President Kennedy sends your sons to fight over there, to help the crooks hold on to what they stole from innocent men, women, and children, we will trigger World War III. And when that starts...
So already here, they knew about World War III already. And that time is almost reached. And that's why I don't give a shit about Twitch and Mitch and all this fucking shit, because who cares, bro? They're gonna do World War III.
You can be sure we cannot emerge from that war a victor. We are going to lose that war, because there is not one nation in the world that will let one of their sons fight with us for such a cause. I know and speak to these ambassadors in Washington and at United Nations, and of the 99 nations there, I've consulted with maybe 70 of them, and when we go to war in Palestine, to help the thieves retain possession of what they have stolen from these innocent people. We're not going to have a man there to fight with us as our allies. And who will these people have supporting them, you ask? Well, 4 days after President Kennedy, or he was then Senator Kennedy, made that statement, on August 28, 1960, the Arab nations called a meeting in Lebanon, and there they decided to resurrect or reactivate the government of Palestine, which has been dormant more or less since the 1948 armed insurrection by...
That's very interesting that you mentioned that. That ship that you just said is also the ship in the Matrix. The name that you wrote, Nebuchadnezzar, that's the name of the ship in the Matrix. And with that ship, they drive to the last city, and the last city is called Zion.
By the Zionists. Not alone that, they ordered the creation of a Palestinian army, and there are now drilling maybe 500,000 soldiers in that area of the world to lead these people back to their homes. With them, they have as their allies all the nations of what is termed the Bandung Conference group. That includes the Soviet Union and every Soviet Union satellite. It includes Red China. It includes every independent country in Asia and Africa, or 80% of the world's total population. 80% of the world's population, 4 out of 5 human beings on the face of the earth will be our enemies at war with us. Not alone are they 4 out of 5 human beings now on the face of this earth, but they are the non-Christian population of the world, and they are the non-Caucasian, the non-white nations of the world. And that's what we face. And what is the reason? The reason is that here in the United States, the Zionists and their co-religionists have complete control of our government. For many reasons, too many and too complex to go in here. At this time, I'll be glad to...
So that's too complex to go through here with the American governments. I can explain to you briefly one more time why they have the influence, and that it's not a thing that happened after JFK. It happened before him. JFK just tried to break the cycle. Most people think JFK was the last real president of the United States, but in reality, he was just the only one that tried to go against them. So what happened? The Jews, they created the Roman Empire, which you know as America today. The person that finds America is called Cristoforo Colombo, but he changes his name to Christopher Columbus. The people that he takes with him are Jews. The moment that he sets sail is the moment where the expulsion of the Jews starts. They land there and they genocide the indigenous people of that land. Sounds familiar? And then with the Freemasons, which are the descendants of the people that built the Temple of Solomon, which is the place of worship for Jewish people, create that country. So that country's foundation is already Jewish. And then they create this like illusion of the American dream, sell that to all the nations, and then they put there from a specific family the presidents. And all these presidents, Bush and Clinton and Obama, for some reason, all have the same cousins. You know, they are 10th cousin, 11th cousin, because they come from the same family. And that family can be described as Janus the Two-Faced. It's like the people that the Jews used during Rome in order to kill Jesus, because they have already controlled Rome back then. Imagine America, imagine now, this is like the second phase of their domination. The first phase was the Roman Empire. But no one knew that the Romans were actually controlled by them. Now on the second phase, they are controlling America. But it's just a rebranded version of Rome. the Roman Empire. They called it, before the Roman Empire, they called it Edom. And now the worldly order is that the Americans are the strongest, but they are like independent, right? But in reality, the Jews control them. The New World Order is when they do these three acts, World War I, World War II, World War III, and then abolish the Old World Order, which was America, and they drive it against the wall and destroy that country. And then they want to emerge as the new leaders of the world, but this time officially.
Answer questions, however, to support that statement. The Zionists and their co-religionists rule this United States as though they were the absolute monarchs of this country. Now you say, well, that's a very broad statement to make, but let me show what happened while you were... I don't want to wear that out.
Can you spell that name? I want to look it up. I couldn't find it. It's Janus. I can Google it for you. Real quick. Janus, the Roman god, is famously depicted with two faces, one looking forward, one looking backwards, symbolizing his role as the god of beginnings, transitions, and endings. All good things in Judaism are three: beginnings, transitions, endings. Heretic dialect, problem, reaction, solution, the Holy Trinity model, etc., etc. And these Roman gods, they are the gods of the Gentiles, but they work for the Jews. And this is their family. So their family lineage are the presidents of the United States. And that's why they are all related to each other. It's an ancient family. And these people have like a specific treasure. And after World War II, the Germans had that treasure, but obviously they took it from them. I show you that treasure. This is the treasure that symbolizes the family tree of these worldly leaders, where they pretend that they are like your leaders, but they are working for them. One of them is this cross here. They are like the Templar. Christian, Judeo-Christianity. Ever heard of it? You see this? These are supposed to be Jews, you know, the elderly people, the wise people that control basically the president. But the presidents of like the world, in their understanding, now are called warlords. And Janus the Two-Faced is a warlord for them. And that's it. So that was the too complex what he meant. It's quite complex here.
Now, let me show you what happened while we were all asleep. I'm including myself with you. We were all asleep. What happened? World War I broke out in the summer of 1914. 1914 was the year in which World War I broke out. There are a few people here my age who remember that. Now that war was waged on one side by Great Britain, France, and Russia, and on the other side by Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. What happened? Within 2 years, Germany had won that war. Not alone won it nominally, but won it actually. The German submarines, which were a surprise to the world, had swept all the convoys from the Atlantic Ocean, and Great Britain stood there without ammunition for her soldiers, stood there with 1 week's food supply facing her, and after that, starvation. At that time, the French army had mutinied. They lost 600,000 of the flower of the French youth in the defense of Verdun on the Somme. The Russian army was defecting. They were picking up their toys and going home. They didn't want to play war anymore. They didn't like the Tsar. and the Italian army had collapsed. Now, Germany, not a shot had been fired on the German soil. Not an enemy soldier had crossed the border into Germany. And yet, here was Germany offering England peace terms. They offered England a negotiated peace on what the lawyers call a status quo ante basis. That means...
So, this is important because in history we don't know about this officially, but Hitler in his speeches also, you can just follow the train. He asked the UK to stop the attacks. And he wanted a ceasefire. But there was a specific family that was very against that. And that family is known as the Rothschild family. And the Rothschild family owned someone whose name is Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill was getting owned because he owed this family a lot of money because he was a gambling addict. And because he was a gambling addict for a very long time, he got put in place there by them. So he was their Janus the Two-Faced. You see how that fucking goes? And then he attacked Germany 3 times in a row, and then Germany retaliated. They didn't initiate the war, but they don't tell you this.
Let's call the war off and let everything be as it was before the war started. Well, England in the summer of 1916 was considering that seriously. They had no choice. It was either accepting this negotiated peace that Germany was magnanimously offering them, or going on with the war and being totally defeated. While that was going on, the Zionists in Germany, who represented the Zionists from Eastern Europe, went to the British War Cabinet.
Ja, aber nicht hier.
I'm going to be
auf
brief
Rumble.
because this is a long story.
We can go Rumble later and listen to the Hitler speeches.
That I make, if anyone here is curious or doesn't believe what I'm saying is at all possible. The Zionists in London went to the British War Cabinet and they said, look here, you can yet win this war. You don't have to give up. You don't have to accept a negotiated peace offered to you now by Germany. You can win this war if the United States will come in as your ally. The United States was not in the war at that time. We were fresh, we were young, we were rich, we were powerful. And they told England, we will guarantee to bring the United States into the war as your ally, to fight with you on your side, if you will promise us Palestine after you win the war. In other words,
so this whole fucking situation in reality was about Palestine. So the initiation of that war, the fact that these people have created Nazism, but this is the very, very deep script now. You got to just follow. This is a letter from Albert Pike in 1871. Then they said this is a hoax. It's a Taxil hoax. And the Taxil hoax was from 1890. Okay, if the hoax was in 1890 and that person pretended as if this person said that to make fun of the Illuminati, how come he predicted Zionism, Nazism, Israel versus Palestine, then the Zionist movement creating the state of Israel, them fighting against political Zionism, or the whole plot of the world they had already written out, like a movie. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. On Act 2, they needed to create a problem. It's like 9/11. Problem, reaction, solution. We want them to invade Iraq. We need to create an enemy. So we do 9/11 ourselves like our prophecies tell us. because 9/11 is written in their religion, Judaism. And then when they do 9/11, they say, hey, we got attacked. Who was the attackers? It was Bin Laden. Now you have the perfect enemy to present to the people that they need to go to war for the Jews in the Middle East. And that's when the conquest of the Middle East basically really went off. The challenge on God was made on 9/11. And then they create this situation with Nazism, as I explained, because the National Socialists, they didn't call themselves Nazis. These represent the Jews that worked with them, but behind the scenes. And then they created together this one, Zionism. Nazism and Zionism is connected to each other, because this refers to this for its existence. So when Zionism says we need a homeland for the Jewish people, don't you remember the Holocaust? That is the problem, and the solution is to take over Palestine. And that's why the institution of the sovereign state of Palestine in Israel happened during the Nazi movement. So when the Second World War, international communism is also Jewish, because they were all Jews, the international communists. You see how tightly knit their system is, but they pretend as if they are different fractions. Must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which we would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. So after the war, they just created a situation where they make everyone kind of atheist and let them forget, you know, just make entertaining distractions, this and that, keep everyone distracted, MTV, everything, they own all the media. And then the Third World War is gonna come. But this time, they want to destroy Zionism. Before they destroyed Nazism to explain Zionism, then they're gonna destroy Zionism on purpose. And when they do that, they think that they can scapegoat the attention away from them in the last final act, because then people will say when the Zionist movement is defeated, now everything is good, it was just the Zionists. But the Jews have created this movement. This didn't exist 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 900 years ago, 800 years ago, 700 years ago. They do this world plot since 2,000 years. But when they destroy this, and then in the final act, but here you got to be religious to believe it, the Antichrist arrives, aka Dajjal, aka their Messiah, that one eye on the $1 bill. The first degree Mason, the one. And when he arrives, they can say, hey, we unite humanity now under the world leader, and you shall accept it and trust them, because these guys are not the evil Zionists. And that ushers in a new world order.
They made this deal. We will get the United States into this war as your ally. The price you must pay us is Palestine after you have won the war and defeated Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. Now, England had as much right to promise Palestine to anybody as the United States would have to promise Japan to Ireland for any reason whatsoever. It's absolutely absurd that Great Britain, that never had any connection or any interest or any right in what is known as Palestine, should offer it as coin of the realm to pay the Zionists for bringing the United States into the war. However, they made that promise in October of 1916. October 1916. And shortly after that, I don't know how many here remember it, the United States, which was almost totally pro-German, totally pro-German, because the newspapers here were controlled by Jews, the bankers were Jews, all the media of mass communications in this country were controlled by Jews, and they were pro-German.
Okay, now look into your time now. It's 2025. Which of these allegations are not true till this day? And you know this is the truth.
Because their people, in a majority of cases, came from Germany, and they wanted to see Germany lick the Tsar. The Jews didn't like the Tsar, and they didn't want Russia to win this war. So the German bankers, the German Jews, Kuhn Loeb, and the other big banking firms in the United States refused to finance France or England to the extent of $1. They stood aside and they said, as long as France and England are tied up with Russia, not 1 cent. But they poured money into Germany. They fought with Germany against Russia, trying to lick the Tsarist regime. Now, those same Jews, when they saw the possibility of getting Palestine, they went to England and they made...
Now, one more time. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati, Jews, to overthrow the powers of the Tsar in Russia and making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. Between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. So this theater show that you're watching, the First World War, the Second World War, these are like movie acts for them. And they use humanity to do that for them.
Made this deal. At that time, everything changed, like the traffic light that changes from red to green, where the newspapers had been all pro-German, where they'd been telling the people the difficulties that Germany was having fighting Great Britain commercially and in other respects. All of a sudden, the Germans were no good. They were villains. They were Huns. They were shooting Red Cross nurses.
So they used the Germans, yeah, pitting them against each other, and then destroying that country from the inside out with wokeness. They introduced LGBTQ, gay bars, transgender surgeries, and then there comes a man that is against it. And then they burn their books. LGBTQ and like communism and feminism and destroying like the family unit and pushing Netflix and pushing specific imaging in the media and creating hookup culture. All these things are an attack on society in order to destroy you so they can use you and just make you docile, weak. Because when you are in that state, your vibration as a country is so low and third party can do whatever they want with you. You are like animals, like sheep.
They were cutting off babies' hands, and they were no good. Well, shortly after that, Mr. Wilson declared war on Germany. The Zionists in London sent these cables to the United States, to Justice Brandeis, go to work on President Wilson. We're getting from England what we want. Now you go to work, and you go to work on President Wilson and get the United States into the war. And that did happen. That's how the United States got into the war. We had no more interest in it. We had no more right to be in it than we have to be on the moon tonight instead of in this room. Now the war, World War I, in which the United States participated, had absolutely no reason to be our war. We went in there, we were railroaded into it, if I can be vulgar, we were suckered into that war merely so that the Zionists of the world could obtain Palestine. Now, that is something that the people in the United States have never been told. They never knew why we went into World War I. Now, what happened? After we got into the war, the Zionists went to Great Britain and they said, well, we performed our part of the agreement. Let's have something in writing that shows that you are going to keep your bargain and give us Palestine after you win the war. Because they didn't know whether the war would last another year or another 10 years.
So now you have to understand, these people are so powerful, their control of all humans is so strong, because their system is so tightly knit and nothing goes through without them, that when they create the war and choose the parties that are at war, they can also decide who wins. Like a game. And then you look into the Rothschild family and you notice that the Red Shields, they sell weapons to both parties and then make specific choices on the stock market predicting the outcomes of the wars. And then out of the war that they create, that they decide who wins, they make more money out of it. They make exponential money in every step. So when the humans pay taxes on every step, tax on getting money, tax on spending money, these people make money on every step. It's the complete inversion.
So they started to work out a receipt. The receipt took the form of a letter, and it was worded in very cryptic language so that the world at large wouldn't know what it was all about. And that was called the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was...
So now we are at the creation of the State of Israel, yeah? Exactly. And here now I need to show you obviously the Balfour Declaration. And this Balfour Declaration is just the Rothschild family basically admitting that they have created this state. And here they even admit that it isn't called Israel, it's called Palestine. You know, when the Jews now say, oh yeah, you know, actually this Palestine is not real and all this fucking crap. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country, I should be grateful if you would bring the declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. And then what did they do? They went in and they fucked everyone. They sent everyone out of their homes. They used guns. They didn't let them get back into their homes. They threw away the fucking locks. They changed the locks. The keys didn't work anymore. This is an evil I can't comprehend. So you understand what type of people we are up against. They do not see us as humans.
Merely Great Britain's promise to pay the Zionists what they had agreed upon as a consideration for getting the United States into the war. So this great Balfour Declaration that you hear so much about is just as phony as a $3 bill, and I don't think I can make it more emphatic than that. Now, that is where all the trouble started. The United States was in the war. The United States crushed Germany. We went in there, and it's history, you know what happened. Now, when the war was ended, and the Germans went to Paris, to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, there were 117 Jews there as a delegation representing the Jews, headed by Bernard Baruch. I was there, I ought to know. Now what happened? The Jews at that peace conference, when they were cutting up Germany and parceling out Europe to all these nations that claimed a right to a certain part of European territory, the Jews said, how about Palestine for us? And they produced, for the first time, to the knowledge of Germans, this Balfour Declaration. So the Germans, for the first time, realized, oh, that was the game. That's why the United States came into the war. And the Germans,
No,
for
I'm
the
not
first
screen
time
recording it.
realized that they were defeated. They suffered
Will be
this
fine.
terrific reparations that
This
was
stream is not too hard.
slapped onto them because the Zionists wanted Palestine, and they were determined to get it at any cost. Now that brings us up to another very interesting point. When the Germans realized this, they naturally resented it. Up to that time, the Jews had never been better off in any country in the world than they had been in Germany. You had Mr. Rosenow there, who was maybe 100 times as important in industry and finance as Bernard Baruch in this country. You had Mr. Ballin, who owned the two big steamship lines, the North German Lloyd and the Hamburg American line, thank you. You had Mr. Bleichsröder, who was the banker for the Hohenzollern family. You had the Warburgs in Hamburg, who were the big merchant bankers, the biggest in the world. The Jews were doing very...
Pay attention to the names, okay? Because these names are all used throughout history for Jews when they change their names. You know, these are not their real names. Wahlberg and fucking all this shit. And then, for example, Mileikovsky and stuff like that, they change that also, so you don't find out, you know?
well in Germany. No question about that. Now, the Germans felt, well, that was quite a sellout. It was a sellout that I could best...
So this is a very important part now, and you have to understand this in order to keep going. What about all the people that the Jews sacrificed? Because their own people also died. Obviously in World War II, there has been Jewish people being killed. It wasn't obviously 6 million, that is a lie. But regardless, it was people. Why is that no problem to them for their, like, endeavors when they create these situations in order to reach Palestine? Why do they sacrifice so many Jews? Well, when you look into the Talmud, it says that you can sacrifice your own people when it furthers the endeavor, you know? I'm gonna show you.
Compare, suppose the United States was at war today with the Soviet Union, and we were winning, and we told the Soviet Union, well, let's quit. We offer you peace terms. Let's forget the whole thing. And all of a sudden, Red China came into the war as an ally of the Soviet Union, and throwing them into the war brought about our defeat, a crushing defeat, with the reparations the likes of which man's imagination cannot encompass. Imagine then, after that defeat, if we found out that it was the Chinese in this country, our Chinese citizens, who all the time we thought they were loyal citizens working with us, was selling us out to the Soviet Union, and it was through them that Red China was brought
allow
into
that,
the
kids.
war against us. How would we feel in the United States against
Imagine
Chinese?
going to the toilet and he doesn't
I don't
let
think
you
one of
out.
them would dare show
God
his
promised
face
to me
on
2000
any
years
street.
ago.
There wouldn't be lampposts enough convenient to take care of them. Imagine how we would feel. Well, that's how the Germans felt towards these Jews. We've been so nice to them, and from 1905 on, when the first communist revolution in Russia failed and the Jews had to scramble out of Russia, they all went to Germany, and Germany gave them refuge, and they were treated very nicely. And here, they sold Germany down the river for no reason at all, other than they wanted Palestine as a so-called Jewish commonwealth. Now, Nahum, Sakalau, all the great leaders, the big names that you read about in connection with Zionism today, they, in 1919, 1920, 21, 22, and 23, they wrote in all their papers, and the press was filled with their statements, that the feeling against the Jews in Germany is due to the fact that they realized that this great defeat was brought about by our intercession and bringing the United States into the war against them. The Jews themselves admitted that. It wasn't that the Germans in 1919 discovered that a glass of Jewish blood tasted better than Coca-Cola or Münchner beer. There was no religious feeling. There was no sentiment against those people merely on account of their religious belief. It was all political. It was economic. It was anything but religious. Nobody cared in Germany whether a Jew went home and pulled down the shades and said Shema Yisrael or Our Father. No one cared in Germany any more than they do in the United States. Now, this feeling that developed later in Germany was due to one thing, that the Germans held the Jews responsible for their crushing defeat for no reason at all, because World War I was started against Germany for no reason for which they were responsible. They were guilty of nothing, only of being successful. They built up a big navy, they built up world trade.
So this is now the thing with this situation. He is right in the fact that the Germans didn't give a shit about Jews at all. For them it was like just a religion. But then they started to do what they do, you know. And then there was a big noticer that noticed, and he told everyone about what he's noticing. And when he told them about it, they started to notice it too. And that's when they became basically against them. Because, well, what they do is a bit abnormal, I guess.
You must remember, Germany, at the time of Napoleon, at the time of the French Revolution, what was the German Reich consisted of 300 small city-states.
That is also something that I don't understand. People just accept this narrative without even trying to get through the psychological part about it. So why would a country... Okay, let's think about these people. So they have been kicked out 110 times in the past 2000 years out of countries, and they accuse them of like specific things, like child sacrifices and like invading the governments and infiltrating every aspect of their society, and children going missing and poisoning the wells and taking control over the food supply and all of this shit. And then in Germany, a whole country all of a sudden says that they don't want to have anything to do with them, and that they don't want to have the Rothschild banking in Germany anymore. And then they kicked out the bank, so the Rothschild banking. What did the Jews do? They declared war on Germany for kicking out their bank. Can you believe it? Happened with a lot of people, by the way, in the Middle East. A lot of people. So this is the script, yeah? This is when the Jews declared war on Germany. But they didn't declare this war because someone died. They declared the war because the Germans officially said, we are now independent from their system. You know this matrix thing? Imagine a whole nation says that we don't want to be part of it anymore. Well, that doesn't work, because then Judea declares war on Germany and they advise everyone that is in their control, which is everyone, that you should not buy any German goods. You know, boycott of German goods. And when they, in history, when the Jews show you the fucking Hollywood movies, which the Hollywood executives and the film directors are Jewish, then they will say, yeah, the Germans boycotted Jewish products and said in this store is a Jew like owner and things like this. And they write a Star of David on Jewish owned like facilities. Yeah, but that happened after they boycotted the German goods. So this is crazy. So the the Jewish shop closings that they always tell you about happened exactly after them getting boycotted. So how is it that when the Jews attack people and then they defend themselves, that they in history say that they got attacked and that they are defending themselves? Even though it's not true. Exactly like Palestine. They say they are defending themselves from Palestine. And Palestine is attacking Israel instead of the other way around, which is just the truth. And when you say it, they will call you a Nazi, an anti-Semite, and that you should get deplatformed, and they take all your fucking Twitch accounts, and they fucking ban you, and they silence you. Why do you think that happens? Because the truth is something else. So Jews publicly declare war against Germany on March 24, 1933, starting with a boycott of German goods. Germany responded by closing Jewish shops, starting April 1st, 1933. They are lying to you. And now, the thing is, how fucked this world is once you know the truth, because you have to understand, while I am like with all these fucking bots for fucking 5-6 years, I know about all of this shit, and I don't know, like you can't even tell them the truth. Let's say, for example, I know this and I feel like I need to let people know, yeah, did you know that, for example, the Jewish people actually attacked Germans first and then the Germans defended themselves? They would call you crazy. Do you understand how deep the brainwashing goes? They made sure to brainwash you to such an extent that you can't just see the truth even if you are shown it. Okay, Sir Benjamin Freedman, go on. I always add just like the informational parts about what he says when I think there's a need, yeah?
Principalities, dukedoms, and so forth. 300 little separate political entities. And between that time, between the period of between Napoleon and Bismarck, they were consolidated into one state. And
the
within
Void
50
Century,
years after that time, they
it's
became
either
one of the
Egypt
world's
or
great powers. Their
World
navy
War II.
was rivaling Great Britain's. They were doing business all over the world. They could undersell anybody and make better products. And what happened? What happened as a result of that? There was a conspiracy between England, France, and Russia that we must slap down Germany, because there isn't one historian in the world that can find a valid reason why those three countries decided to wipe Germany off the map politically. Now, what happened after that? When Germany realized that the Jews were responsible for her defeat, they naturally resented it. But not a hair on the head of any Jew was harmed. Not a single hair. Professor Tanzel of Georgetown University, who had access to all the secret papers of the State Department, wrote in his book and quoted from a State Department document written by Hugo Schoenfeld, a Jew who Cordell Hull sent to Europe in 1933 to investigate the so-called camps of political prisoners. And he wrote back that he found them in very fine condition. They were in excellent shape. Everybody treated well.
So now check this out. The Jews that they then killed there, you know, and that the top dog Jews sacrificed in order to get Palestine through this war, those Jews were Ashkenazi Jews. And Ashkenazi Jews, surprise, surprise, are not dated towards the real Jews. They are considered Goy. Because in the deep lore of Judaism, once you go very deep, you understand that the Masons, which they are, they have like a level system. Which we are at the bottom, and at the very top they are, but in between each other, they have like a ranking system. Like fucking, you know, like One Piece when the Gorosei and stuff like that, okay? And the Ashkenazis, they are considered European Jews because they converted to Judaism. They are not born into it. Their bloodline is impure. And the purer and more inbred the family tree is, the more closer they are to this like top level where they are right under the Antichrist, which is one of the families is the Rothschild family. Why do you think this Rothschild motherfuckers always look so fucking fucked? It's because they are like horse breeders. They don't want to breed outside of their own lineage, so they keep this satanic bloodline as pure as possible.
And they were filled with communists. Well, a lot of them were Jews, because the Jews happened to be maybe 98% of the communists in Europe at that time. And there were some priests there, and ministers, labor leaders, Masons, and others who had international affiliation. Now when he says Masons that had international affiliation, he doesn't mean Jews only. The Masons are the top level shills of humanity, which are not Jewish, but they work right under them. And they are like presented as the world leaders, the stars, you know, and fucking the Hollywood stars, the movie stars. All these motherfuckers that go to Epstein Island and shit. And when Jay-Z shows you the all-seeing eye with the hand signals all the time, those are the biggest shills of this planet. And they are working right under them, and that's why they sell their soul, and that's why they fucking do all these weird child sacrificing fucking BS, and then they have them on tape, and then Epstein blackmails them, and they already know that they are slaves, but they accept it because they get cars, money, fame, the whole system is owned by them, so they sell them this dream. Why do they get depressed? Because when you are in this reality, when you are at the top, and you realize what you are doing, you get that you are selling your soul. After some time, driving a Lambo is not gonna make you happy anymore when you know what you're doing. The Jews sort of tried to keep the lid on this fact They didn't want the world to really understand that they had sold out Germany and that the Germans resented that. So they did take appropriate action against them. They,
Yo, what's up,
shall
bottom?
I say, discriminated against them wherever they could. They shunned them, the same as we would the Chinese or the Negroes or the Catholics or anyone in this country that sold us out to an enemy and brought about our defeat. Now, after a while, the Jews of the world didn't know what to do. So they called a meeting in Amsterdam. Jews from every country in the world attended in July 1933. And they said to Germany, you fire Hitler and you put every Jew back into his former position, whether he was a communist, no matter what he was. You can't treat us that way. And we, the Jews of the world, are calling upon you and serving this ultimatum upon you. Well, the Germans told them, you can imagine. So what did they do? They broke up. And Samuel Untermeyer, if the name means anything to people here, you want to ask a question?
There were no communists in Germany at that time. They were called social democrats.
Well, I don't want to go by what they were called. We're now using English words, and what they were called in Germany is not very material, but they were communists because in 1917, the communists took over Germany for a few days. Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht and a group of Jews in Germany took over the government for 3 days. In fact, when the Kaiser ended the war, he fled to Holland because he thought the communists were going to take over Germany as they did Russia, and that he was going to meet the same fate that the Tsar did in Russia. So he left and went to Holland for safety and for security. Now, at that time, when the communist threat in Germany was quashed, it was quiet, the Jews were working still, trying to get back into their former status, and the Germans fought them in every way they could without hurting a hair on any.
So when the Jews, they try to weaken a country, they specifically roll out gender ideology that they write down in the Talmud. And this stuff here is very real, and you can even Google this. But the problem with it is, after too many people noticed, they changed the page. So when I type in now 8 genders of the Talmud, I have also screenshots of this page here, okay, from 2 years ago, where it said instead of 7, it said 8, and then instead of saying like identified male at birth without developing secondary male sexual characteristics because of castration. So they have in their religion the fucking Saris Adam gender, where there's a dude basically just cuts off his dick. And the fucking transgender ideology that you see all around you, that is Judaism. So these 8 genders here, actually they changed it again. I don't know why they do it, why they did it. But anyways, this situation here that you see, this is just Judaism, bro. Nothing else. And when they want to destroy a country, they make sure to push this specifically. And that's why you see this gender ideology everywhere around you. And now, to make the final fucking, like, connection, look at it. This guy is a rabbi. A man of God. If their God wouldn't allow this, he wouldn't do this. This is a rabbi. The Star of David is on front of this because they are the people creating this. So then, when the Jews obviously control Europe as well, then this is what they obviously show everywhere, right? And then she will explain to you that Europe is the values of the Talmud. I showed you the values.
Europe is the values of the Talmud. The Jewish sense of personal responsibility.
These people that they say they are representing you, they are not representing you. They are just there to push their ideology on you.
Anyone's head. The same as one group, the prohibitionists, fought the people who were interested in liquor, and they didn't fight one another with pistols. They did it every way they could. Well, that's the way they were fighting the Jews in Germany. And at that time, mind you, there were 80 to 90 million Germans, and there were only 460,000 Jews. Less than 1/2 of 1% of the population of Germany were Jews. And yet they controlled all the press, they controlled most of the economy, because they had come in and with cheap money, you know the way the mark was devalued, they bought up practically everything. Well, in 1933, when Germany refused to surrender, mind you, to the World Conference of Jews in Amsterdam, they broke up, and Mr. Untermeyer came back to the United States, who was the head of the American delegation and the president of the whole conference, and he went from the steamer to ABC and made a radio broadcast throughout the United States in which he said, "The Jews of the world now declare a holy war against Germany. We are now engaged in a sacred conflict against the Germans, and we are going to starve them into surrender. We are going to use a worldwide boycott against them that will destroy them because they are dependent upon their export business." And it is a fact that 2/3 of Germany's food supply had to be imported, and it could only be imported with the proceeds of what they exported, their labor.
Bro, once you realize that the Germans got attacked, and they didn't attack, they just wanted to defend themselves, everything becomes clear. It is the exact same thing that happened with Palestine. They are defending themselves, but they are alleging that they are attacking, and they use the media that they control to portray their point of view.
So if Germany could not export, 2/3 of Germany's population would have to starve. There just was not enough food for more than 1/3 of a population. Now, in this declaration, which I have here, it was printed and a whole page, in the New York Times on August 7th, 1933, Mr. Samuel Untermeyer boldly stated that this economic boycott is our means of self-defense. President Roosevelt has advocated its use in the NRA, which some of you may remember, where everybody was to be boycotted unless they followed the rules laid down by the New Deal, which of course was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court at that time. Nevertheless,
Germany occupied multiple neighboring countries though, because they tried to get rid of this Jewish influence around them. You know, all these countries that you see right now, you think it was different before? You think now the fucking UK is owned by them, Italians owned by them, Spain is owned by them, Greece is owned by them, Germany is owned by them. Everywhere is the same script being deployed. It's because it's a world conspiracy that they are fighting against. And when you think about Israel versus Palestine, it just symbolically shows the struggle of humanity against these 0.2% of the world population.
Yes, the Jews of the world declared a boycott against Germany, and it was so effective that you couldn't find one thing in any store anywhere in the world with the words "Made in Germany" on it. In fact, an executive of the Woolworth Company told me that they had...
I thought those Jews back then were mainly in Poland. This is wrong. Jewish people live in exile. That means they are not rooted anywhere. They are everywhere. So the minority of the countries are Jews. Wherever they are. There's Iranian Jews, bro. Iran. And they are the minority of the population there. You have Jews in Somalia. This Jewish situation is a world thing. It's not dated towards anywhere. And you even have Japanese Jews in the Edo era. Do you know the Edo era? They made the folklore about the Tengu. And the Tengu is a demon that is depicting a person that goes and learns from a rabbi and then receives after 6 months training the Torah no Maki, the Torah scroll.
To dump millions of dollars worth of crockery and dishes into the river, that their stores were boycotted. If anyone came in and found a dish marked "Made in Germany," they were picketed with signs, Hitler, murderer, and so forth, and like something like these sit-ins that are taking place in the South. R.H. Macy, which is controlled by a family called Strauss, who also happen to be Jews, a woman found stockings there, which came from Chemnitz marked...
The Palestinians receive zero support, Medusa. Don't you realize every government is waiting for their death? Of course I realize it. Of course I realize it. What do you think? I think any highly of the Saudi Arabian government? The Saudi Arabian government, the Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is a Jew. Surprise, surprise. His descendants are Jews. He was friends with Epstein. He was on his island. He has a blackmail material on him. There was 3 pictures in the mansions of Epstein with his biggest trophies on blackmail operations. Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Mohammed bin Salman. No surprise that the Arabs and the Israelis tried to normalize relations for such a long time. It's all a fucking show, it's a facade.
Made in Germany. Well, they were cotton stockings. They may have been there 20 years, because since I've been observing women's legs in the last 20 years, I haven't seen a pair with cotton stockings on them. So Macy, I saw Macy boycotted with hundreds of people walking around with signs, murderers and Hitlerites.
Yo, Bashi, what's up, man?
Now, up to that time, not one hair of any Jew had been hurt in Germany.
So not a single person by this time, even though all of this shit happened, yeah? Not a single person got harmed. You have to understand. All this like, oh yeah, Judea declares war on Germany and then boycott German goods, drive their economy against the wall. The Germans then saying, okay, now we boycott Israeli goods. At that time, there was no one dying of anything. No one cared. And then one person came and tried to explain what's going on and why they do it. And then they understood. As a country, they kicked out the Rothschild banking, and that was the death sentence for the Germans. What happened with Gaddafi? Gaddafi kicked out the Rothschild banking system, and they wanted to create their own currency. So they are out of the Jewish banking system. And then he got killed.
There was no suffering, there was no starvation, there was no murder, there was nothing. Now, that, naturally, the German...
Poland suffered a lot through war, though, telling this as a Polish person. Yeah, but this is obsolete, because it's obvious that in war, there is always a lot of, like, suffering. But the problem arises is when you don't focus on the people that are creating the war. Because the Germans, they are defending themselves from these world minority leaders that are trying to control the world for their free world war plot, where they have written it out already in the 1800s, and they know the players, they know who wins, who loses, UK and the powers of the Tsar, and Germany, and then Germany against the Jews, and then the political Zionism established from that. Everything is written out. And if there is casualties in between, obviously that's bad, because at all these wars, never forget, no one wins. The humanity loses, but the Jews win.
And said, why, who are these people to declare a boycott against us and throw all our people out of work and our industries come to a standstill? Who are they to do that to us? And they naturally resented it. Certainly they painted swastikas on stores owned by Jews. Why should a German go in and give their money to a storekeeper who is part of a boycott, who is going to starve Germany into surrender into the Jews of the world, who are going to dictate who their premier or chancellor was to be? Well, it was ridiculous. That continued for some time. And it wasn't until 1938 when a young Jew from Poland walked into the German embassy in Paris and shocked one of the officials that the Germans really started to get rough with the Jews in Germany. And you found them then breaking windows and having street fights and so forth. Now, for anyone to say that, I don't like to use the word anti-Semitism because it's meaningless, but it means something to you still, so I'll have to use it. The only reason that there was any feeling in Germany against Jews was that they were responsible, number one, for World War I, number two, for this worldwide boycott, and number three, did I say for World War I, they were responsible for the boycott, and also for World War II, because after this thing got out of hand, it was absolutely necessary for the Jews and Germany to lock horns in a war to see which one was going to survive.
Okay, so now we hold again, we always need to go back to this, always. Because this is all he is explaining. World War I, the Jews create the war between the powers of the Tsars in Russia and the German and the British. And then they decide who wins, which was the Germans. Then the Germans will become obsolete and they get rid of them, kind of. So they create Zionism in the Second World War, and this is from 1871. And then in the Second World War they create political Zionism and then explain that they need this new movement to is justified because of the old movement, which is called Nazism. So out of Nazism born is Zionism. And then they together make a coin. This coin is so important because it symbolizes the Nazis and the Zionists' cooperation at some point. Because the Nazis didn't call themselves Nazis in the beginning, you know. They called themselves National Socialists, and the Nazis, they were Jews. That is very hard to understand, but you know, they didn't say we are Nazis. National Socialists were National Socialists. The Jews said that these people are Nazis. They used it like a terminology like bigot. And bro, so the Nazis were the first bigots basically. And then they create this coin when they travel from Germany to Palestine. And it says on the front, tell from the war, but from the back it says a Nazi drives to Palestine. And then tell them from the attack. Which attack? The attack that this year did against the people of Palestine under the justification of this year. It's all a little fucking theater show, bro. It's very hard to relieve, I know, but this is just reality. You have been brainwashed. And then they lead us towards the Third World War, which now this is where we are. And this is the one that I am trying to warn you about. Because in this part here, the Jews will say, we defeated the evil Zionists, we are the good ones, we are the good Jews basically. And then they introduce to you the Antichrist and say you got to like now follow under them, you know, the new world order is established.
In the meanwhile, I had lived in Germany, and I knew that the Germans had decided Europe is going to be Christian or communist. There is no in-between. It's going to be Christian or it's going to be communist. And the Germans decided, we're going to keep it Christian if possible. And they started to rearm. And their intention was, by that time...
So now this one is one that is also a bit like a deeper lore knowledge. Hitler was researching about the three Abrahamic religions because he noticed that for some reason one of them is powered by the devil. So then he tried to find out which one he shall follow. Shall he follow Islam or shall he follow Christianity? That's why he had so many Muslim countries as allies, because he respected the Islamic religion. Was Freedman a Jew? Yeah, Benjamin Freedman was Jewish. He was born Jewish. But during his life, he started to change his view. He thought that what they are doing is wrong. And then he tried to warn the people of America by advising JFK about a global conspiracy regarding his own people. And JFK understood it and then went and said, we are under attack. It's a global conspiracy and it's not with weapons. It's not by invasion, it is by infiltration. What do these people do? They can't invade something because they have no place. They infiltrate all around the world and jack all the key positions. Now I will show you what this infiltration looks like on a practical manner.
About that. I am just a guy, a libertarian who wants to help the world, and many Jews want to help.
Greg, is the world getting any better?
That's a loaded question.
No, it's not a loaded question. Has the Western world gotten better or worse over the last 3 decades? Not the whole world, not global poverty, not the average lifestyle of Africans.
So then what are you talking about then? Pick a dimension, right?
Oh, you want to give me? I'll give you some dimensions. In the Western world, have poverty, obesity, employment, suicide, alcoholism, drug overdoses, SSRI use.
Let's talk about that.
Can you show me a single... No. You know what, Greg? We're not going to just talk about it. This isn't the Greg show.
It's not about the Jews.
No, Greg. You just interrupt every time. And this is the problem. I've given you 10 minutes. You got embarrassed 9 minutes ago with your it's the Ashkenazi. No, it's not, because you got a whole bunch of examples of Sephardic Jews. And then what do you want to do? And it's so funny because Mads down in the Purple Pill commented on this. It's going to become the Greg show. Why is it that every time we let a Jew up onto the panel, it's, I'm here, ask me questions? Is there some kind of genetic paranoia, schizophrenia, and narcissism runs rampant amongst a certain group of people? Is that perhaps why you would come into a room and say, I'm now here. Let's talk about all these things. There's 10 other people that have been patiently waiting for an hour. But oh wow, I went on a podcast once with Kim Iverson. You've got 11,000 followers. Great. Truth Teller's got 8x that. If we take the combined group of the people on this panel, you're nobody. But you want to make it about you. You want it to be your conversation. Why is that? Why is it has to come back to your angles, your topics? You want to redirect in this route, this route, this route, this route? Why is that? Why do Jews do that? Why have they been kicked out of 109 different countries 1,000+ times? Have things gotten better or worse? Let's talk about it, you eagerly said. Walk through the mall, Greg. Do people look healthier than they were 30 years ago? Not a chance. Look at culture, Greg. Is the music better or is it worse? Do you remember 30 years ago? Do you remember obese black women at the Oscars grinding on each other? while flames are in the background and a whole bunch of people like sycophants sitting there celebrating the beauty of it? Would people have looked at Lizzo 30 years ago and said, there's a healthy, happy, productive member of society? No. 30 years ago, did you have trans people reading story time to children and having it clapped about by a bunch of liberals? No. Do you know why? Because only 50 years ago, that would have been labeled a mental illness. That person would have probably been put in an institution. And now I am a bigot for opposing it. Have things gotten better or worse, Greg? You know what I'm now going to do? I'm going to put up a thread that I made about a year ago on how everything's getting worse. Do you know how much worse, Greg? So much worse that if you actually take into account inflation, what you find is that your average person today has less purchasing power for things like eggs, milk, cars, homes than they did during the Great Depression, Greg. Are they getting better or are they getting worse? They're clearly getting worse, which is why suicide is skyrocketing, why Canada is pushing to literally legalize assisted suicide, to normalize it. They want to make it government assisted. Let's put out an advertisement. Are you depressed? Do you want to just end it all? Well, come in and we'll make it extra glorious by making sure you can watch the latest Snow White and the 7 diversity hires as we end your life. Because you're miserable, because everything's getting worse, just like it did where else? Greg? Was it Weimar Germany? Was it in Russia under the Bolsheviks? What do those have in common, Greg? So you can sit there and you can act like an absolute lunatic and say, I think things are great. Even though literally, according to statistics, to be middle class, you now have to be in the top 10% of income earners. 10%! What does that mean about the 90% below them, Greg? It means that they're impoverished. They are now lower class. You have taken a healthy, productive society that just a couple decades ago looked like Dennis the Menace, with families able to afford a reasonable size home, to send their kid to a school that was safe, that was productive, that had values, like Christianity, Greg, that your religion would suggest our God is burning in a vat of excrement in hell. And because certain groups of people got power, they got to go in and say, you know what we need to remove from schools and from all the public facilities is that crucifix. Because that crucifix, that is really offensive. Offensive to who, Greg? Is it the people that believe that guy's burning in hell? Wow, I wonder if it is. Do you know what they replaced those crucifixes with, Greg? With LGBT pride flags. With their kids literally put with a rainbow over top of them and march down the street celebrating that they can be a boy or a girl if they want to. Have things gotten better or have they gotten worse, Greg? And you know where that rainbow comes from? Is it weird that the Jewish Oblast has the exact same flag?
This is very important for you to understand. They took this flag, the scheme of it, from one of their own fucking things.
And then, oh, by the way, also is the Noah.
This is the Noahide laws. This is the symbol of it. It's just insane.
Noahide law flag? Do you know what the Noahide laws are, Greg? It's everybody being essentially a slave to Jews, which is what Zionism is, which is what I oppose.
So when you read about these laws, they explain where, like, yeah, there's 2,000 slaves on each Jew and stuff like that. And our children are supposed to raise that flag and worship that flag and then cut off their genitals. And it's just madness. And when you speak about this, they attack you.
So if you want to say, are things getting better or worse? They might be getting better for the group of people that is being dumbed down if they should be enjoying slavery, which they shouldn't. And do you know why slavery is bad? Because it's been the people on TV for generations that have been scolding and shaming whites for slavery that was orchestrated disproportionately by the very people that have been doing the oppressing.
So the people, these Jews, they like it when the races fight against each other, especially when white versus black. Race war. They create this slavery problem, okay? And then amplify it with Black Lives Matter, the counter solution, and then they make that one also extreme, and then it turns into white racism. But the people that started it were not white people, they were white but Jewish. And Jews don't refer to themselves as whites. They say we just have sometimes the same complexion. So, you're getting lied to. All this fucking Black Lives Matter and all this fucking crap? Bro, it's just Jewish invention.
The very people doing the brainwashing, the very people doing the shaming and guilting. So no more, Greg. People aren't going to listen to it. They're not going to pay attention. You don't get to come in and say, I'm the center of attention, ask me questions. We don't care, Greg. What we care about is making the world better. We're not going to listen to any more liars and lunatics saying, oh, you guys are just like feminists trying to find a problem and saying it's all the men. Because like Truth Teller said, they're largely Jewish men, Greg. And so we're going to notice that common denominator. And then when you sit there and say the feminists, and Truth interrupts you and says, who pushed that one, Greg? Was it Jews? Who pushed racial dynamics? Who got rid of Malcolm X? Because he talked about the Jews.
Yeah, Malcolm X also is deemed as a hero, but no one really talks about the fact that when he started to fight for the black people, he didn't fight against the whites. He fought against the Jews. Did you know that? Huh? Wait a minute. I have it. Okay, so this is from Malcolm X, yeah? And just understand how severe this situation is. When I talk about these people and I get demonetized and I get banned and Kanye West gets his bank accounts frozen and all this shit, well, they also kill you, you know? This guy made this speech here and after that he got assassinated. It's a pattern I realized in history. There was a very famous man in the music industry who also started to criticize them. And then he died as well. And his name was Michael Jackson.
Jews right here in Harlem who run these whiskey stores that get you drunk. It is Jews that run these old rundown stores that sell you bad food. It is Jews who control the economy of Harlem and use it for themselves and for the benefit of Israel. And got nerve enough to walk around here joining some NAACP or CORE and think we're going to be blind to what they're doing to us. No, someone better pull their coat. Someone better pull their coat before you start pulling some heads. That's not anti-Semitic, that's just plain intelligence. You know, I was on a program here in New York on Channel 13 in which I made a statement concerning how the Jews control about 80% of the economy in most Negro communities across the country. And the Jews organized themselves and wouldn't let that thing come back on Channel 13. It was two interviews. One was done by Baldwin and one was done by me. The one I did two. One was short and one was a 30-minute duration. And at the end of it, you remember Morgenthau jumped up and said that he's not responsible for anything I said. Well, I can understand why he said that, because during that same week, the same old so-called liberal Jews who claim they believe in free speech and all that old kind of stuff, they got together and prevented the showing of that interview again, simply because I had made the statement on that the Jews are the ones who are robbing us and exploiting us up here in Harlem and across the country. Jews believe in censorship more than anybody else. All you got to do is start talking about.
You cannot understand. Can you summarize? Can you not read the subtitles? He's just saying basically everything that I'm saying and then gets assassinated.
The United States had recognized the Soviet Union, which they did in November 1933. The Soviet Union was becoming very powerful, and Germany realized, well, our turn is going to come soon unless we are strong. The same as we in this country are saying today, our turn is going to come soon unless we're strong, and our government is spending $83 or $84 billion of your money for defense, they say. Defense against who? Defense against 40,000...
Oh, we were not done with this video yet. Wait a second, sorry. I forgot to, because I wanted to explain something. Oh, Malcolm X? What the fuck? That is interesting.
For what it's worth. And where did he get his ideologies? Was it through literal communists? And where did communism come from? Greg? Have things gotten better or worse? It's not an open-ended question because I'm tired of it, and I'm tired on behalf of everybody in here. It's obnoxious. The continued need and desire to be at the center of everything is obnoxious. It's why Dave Portnoy has to be worshipped and idolized by everybody. And when someone holds up a sign that says, F you people, what is the response? It's for him to try and destroy the very person that dared to have the audacity to hold up the sign in the first place, or at least to sponsor it financially, or whatever his involvement was. But maybe the very behavior that Dave Portnoy is doing is the reason for the sign, Greg. This isn't about anti-Semitism. It's not about hating anybody. It's about being really tired of patterns. Patterns of psychopathic, narcissistic behavior. That's what Portnoy did, and that's what I believe there's a pattern of, which might relate to that 109 number. And if you want to suggest that it's just crazy talking points, well, then we've got over 1,000 different times where people maybe arrived at a similar conclusion. And so maybe it's time to take a really deep look in the mirror. But guess who probably won't do that? A narcissist. And what would statistics say that you might be? Well, I'll let you finish that equation.
You know, this guy is a fucking heavy, man. This guy is fucking heavy. I wrote some things, he liked my comments and shit. This guy is like very intelligent. Very intelligent.
Little Jews in Moscow that took over Russia and then in their devious ways took over control.
You know what? Fuck it. I show you one of the Hitler speeches, which is important to this situation right now because we are making like history fucking class here. So this is what Hitler has said. So normally, in a normal society, it should be able to just listen to this because why wouldn't you be allowed to unless they have something to hide?
In connection with the Jewish question, I have this to say. It is a shameful spectacle to see how the whole democratic world is oozing sympathy for the poor, tormented Jewish people, but remains hard-hearted and obdurate when it comes to helping them, which is surely, in view of its attitude, an obvious duty. The arguments that are brought up as an excuse for not helping them actually speak for us Germans and Italians. For this is what they say. 1. We, that is the democracies, are not in a position to take in the Jews. Yet in these empires there are not 10 people to the square kilometer, while Germany, with her 135 inhabitants to the square kilometer, is supposed to have room for them. 2. They assure us we cannot take them unless Germany is prepared to allow them a certain amount of capital to bring with them as immigrants. For hundreds of years, Germany was good enough to receive these elements, although they possessed nothing except infectious political and physical diseases. What they possess today, they have by a very large extent gained at the cost of the less astute German nation by the most reprehensible manipulations. Today, we are merely paying this people what it deserves. When the German nation was, thanks to the inflation instigated and carried through by Jews, deprived of the entire savings which it had accumulated in years of honest work, when the rest of the world took away the German nation's foreign investments, when we were divested of the whole of our colonial possessions, these philanthropic considerations evidently carried little noticeable weight with democratic statesmen. Today I can only assure these gentlemen that thanks to the brutal education with which the democracies favored us for 15 years, we are completely hardened to all attacks of sentiment. After more than 800,000 children of the nation had died of hunger and undernourishment at the close of the war, we witnessed almost 1 million head of milking cows being driven away from us in accordance with the cruel paragraphs of a dictate which the humane democratic
So what he's basically describing is this like situation where we already established that the Judea declared war on Germany and that they had been used by them in the First World War and they knew about it. So the First World War was created by them and they then started to notice, they kicked out the Rothschild Bank and then they said Judea declares war on Germany, boycott all German goods and drive their economy against the wall with out of every angle that they had. So then there was like famines and everything and it was a very rough time for Germany. But then they kicked out like their influence, like LGBTQ bars and stuff like that. That already existed there. And transgender surgeries and the art, the media, they cleansed that apparently from some sort of like weird messaging that was satanic. And then they made a counter movement where they banned or where they like boycotted like Jewish goods. And when someone was like the owner of like something was Jewish, they would write a swastika, and for example, this symbolized for them that you fight back, you know? So the boycotting of the Germans with the Jewish stuff, that was just the answer to what they received as an attack, you know?
Of the world.
So what started World War I and World War II? World War I and World War II both got started because Jews wanted to. Because they have like a world plot where it needs to be done in 3 world wars.
On us as a peace treaty. We witnessed over 1 million German prisoners of war being retained in confinement for no reason at all for a whole year.
I already explained about this HK before.
We witnessed over 1.5 million Germans being torn away from all that they possessed in the territories lying on our frontiers and being whipped out with practically only what they wore on their backs. We had to endure having millions of our fellow countrymen torn from us without their consent and without their being afforded the slightest possibility of existence. I could supplement these examples with dozens of the most cruel kind. For this reason, we ask to be spared all sentimental talk. The German nation does not wish its interests to be determined and controlled by any foreign nation.
So, here he is basically saying that the Germans want to go out of their control system. You know what you refer to as the Matrix, where they are at the top of everything. They wanted to govern themselves. That was it. That was enough for the Jewish people to declare war on Germany.
France to the French, England to the English, America to the Americans, and Germany to the Germans. We are resolved to prevent the settlement in our country of a strange people which was capable of snatching for itself all the leading positions in the land.
So they are snatching all the leading positions in the land. Now look 2025. Did anything change about that?
And to oust it, for it is our will to educate our own nation for these leading positions. We have hundreds of thousands of very intelligent children of peasants and of the working classes. We shall have them educated. In fact, we have already begun, and we wish that one day they, and not the representatives of an alien race, may hold the leading positions in the state together with our educated classes. Above all, German culture, as its name alone shows, is German and not Jewish, and therefore its management and care will be entrusted to members of our own nation. If the rest of the world cries out with a hypocritical mien against this barbaric expulsion from Germany of such an irreplaceable and culturally eminently valuable element, We can only be astonished at the conclusions they draw from this situation.
Wait, so what was Winston Churchill's involvement in all of this again? He owed to Rothschild's family a lot of money because he had gambling problems. And the Rothschilds then, in exchange, put him in leading positions and controlled him. Because he was then Janus the Two-Faced, what I explained before. And then they told him to attack Germany. He attacked them apparently 3-4 times, and then they retaliated. And Hitler made a speech where he said that he wants a ceasefire, but they didn't stop. And then he made a speech where he said, there is no point to talking to Sir Winston Churchill because I am just talking to a puppet. I talk through to the Rothschilds, you know?
For how thankful they must be that we are releasing these precious apostles of culture and placing them at the disposal of the rest of the world. In accordance with their own declarations, they cannot find a single reason to excuse themselves for refusing to receive this most valuable race in their own countries. Nor can I see a reason why the members of this race should be imposed upon the German nation, while in the States, which are so enthusiastic about these splendid people, their settlement should suddenly be refused with every imaginable excuse. I think that the sooner this problem is solved, the better, for Europe cannot settle down until the Jewish question is cleared up. It may very well be possible that sooner or later an agreement on this problem may be reached in Europe, even between those nations which otherwise do not so easily come together. The world has sufficient space for settlements, but we must once and for all get rid of the opinion that the Jewish race was only created by God for the purpose of being in a certain percentage a parasite living on the body and the productive work of other nations.
So why does he say being always a certain percentage? Why does he say that? It is because in history these people never change their numbers. I will show you. These are the numbers of the Jewish people from 1925 to 1949. Always around 15 million. Always. Now when I Google Jewish population percentage, 0.2% of the global population. That makes 15.3 million in 2025. So, how does that make sense? The world population rises from 2 billion to 8 billion. But the Jewish population rises from 0.2 to 0. Okay, it wasn't 0.2 back then because they made a bigger percentage since everyone else was less. But they were still 15 million, and they are still now 15 million. Do you get it now? Do you understand why it is so weird when you look into the top in everything and they are somehow owning it, and then you come into the realization that they are only this amount of people, so they have some sort of global agenda. And this global agenda is written is also LGBTQ and stuff like that. And all this fucking shit here that you see all the time. And that's why the media always is somehow controlled by them. And that's why they fucking own Netflix and the news, so they can sell you their lies.
The Jewish race will have to adapt itself to sound constructive activity as other nations do, or sooner or later it will succumb to a crisis of an inconceivable magnitude. One thing I should like to say on this day, which may be memorable for others as well as for us Germans, in the course of my life, I have very often been a prophet and have usually been ridiculed for it. During the time of my struggle for power, It was in the first instance the Jewish race which only received my prophecies with laughter when I said that I would one day take over the leadership of the state, and with it that of the whole nation, and that I would then, among many other things, settle the Jewish problem. Their laughter was uproarious, but I think that for some time now they have been laughing on the other side of their face. Today I will once more be a prophet. If the international Jewish financiers in and outside Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into a world war, then the result will not be the Bolshevization of the earth, and thus the victory of Jewry.
That sounds to me like he knew. Yeah, because JFK, when he talked about the global conspiracy, he meant Jews. And this person was his right-hand advisor that we are listening to all the time. And he told him about everything, you know? How they are having this plan for 3 world wars and then ending it in Palestine and Israel.
Of the world. Now, for this country to now be on the verge of a 3rd world war from which we cannot emerge a victor is something that staggers my imagination. I know that nuclear bombs are measured in terms of megathons.
That was a weird translation. There was no world war. No, you have to understand, these people, their consciousness is different than yours. These people know something that is so fucking weird that I need to always reiterate to you so you understand it. The Jewish people have a plan for 3 world wars. And this plan is already written out in the 1800s. Then, obviously, when something exposes their plans, they will say it's a conspiracy theory, and then someone debunks it. Then they debunked it by saying in history that 1890 there was something called Taxil hoax, and someone just made fun of Illuminati. But the Illuminati are the Jews, because they use the Jewish scripture. And now you have a situation where they predict the First World War, the Second World War, and a lot of people knew about it already because these things are not so in hiding once you know. And they are creating this like Zionism thing only to exploit it by pointing towards Nazism and saying, yeah, these guys were inhuman animals and stuff like that. And now here the Zionist movement is justified, and whatever they do in Palestine doesn't really, no one can say anything because they will scream either anti-Semite or Holocaust or Nazi. And then the Third World War is between Israel and the Islamic world. They have already written this out. This plot is for a very long time. 9/11, the fucking moment where in this part here, they have a little prophecies also. This one is the big one. The plot for the world, so in 3 acts. And then Nazism wasn't even invented before. Yeah, I know it wasn't. It's because I'm trying to explain to you they create these things. And then you look at this and you be like, okay, these people apparently want to destroy Zionism to scapegoat the attention away from them and then emerge as the world leaders in a new world order. And the new world order will be ushered in by an event in the 2001, which is called 9/11. And 9/11, the sphere, like there's like 2 tall towers, and these 2 tall towers, in between, there is like a sphere. And the person designing it, his name is Yamazaki. And it like symbolizes the rotation of the Kaaba. So on 9/11, they waged a war on Islam. But they rebranded as the war on terror. And this person, Bin Laden, is a prophecy in Judaism as well, where these Jews say, yeah, he's gonna come and then bring down these 2 tall towers in the land of Edom. And their prophecies are not prophecies though, they are rituals, because they do them themselves.
Ugliest names of these days is Bin Laden. He's a cockroach that got up from where? I don't know from where he came. And he's sowing such distortion all over the world. 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai writes that there will be a man by the name Bin Laden. It's amazing. Not if you go into the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh was written 2,000 years ago. You don't believe me? Go to Bereshit, Zohar, Bereshit, Perek Vav, Daf Vav, page 6, and Bereshit. And you will see that there is going to be, at the end of times, there will be a man, a person. I mean, not a man, he calls him a dog, who was a dog in heaven, and he came down as a dog, and he took the shape of a human being, and his name is Bin Laden, and he is going to cause tumult all over the world. He will cause wars, and that is at the end of times, Acharit Hayamim. Now, go further to Parashat Vayera in the Zohar HaKadosh. You will find there an extraordinary information. There will be two big buildings in the land of Edom.
A dog shaped as a human, what the fuck? Yeah, that's what they think of all of us. They say that we are goyim. And when he says a dog in the form of an human, that means that Bin Laden is a Gentile. And you and me are also Gentiles. So we are basically humans, but like animals in human form. And the only real humans are them.
Which today we relate the word Edom to America. And those are the biggest, the tallest buildings in the world. And they will be brought down completely. And that will be the sign of the beginning of tremendous wars that will end only in the coming of the Mashiach. You know, I'll tell you something. 1 week before, one of the great rabbis in Israel, a Hasidic rabbi, an Admor, he came to visit Rebbe New Square. And he came with some people, some of his disciples in the car, and they were coming towards the evening. He didn't want to lose the time of Mincha, you know, the prayer of the afternoon. He said, please, can you stop right here? I want to daven, I want to pray Mincha here. They prayed Mincha with Minyan in front of everybody passing in Manhattan. Where? Right there, near the World Center. After he finished the davening, the prayer, he said, say bye-bye to those buildings because you are not going to see them no more.
So then when you read further in the scripture, it reveals to you that out of this scenario, there results a refugee crisis. And the little wars that they conduct in the Middle East after the declaration of the fight on Islam, these will result in the children of Esau and Ishmael mixing in Europe. And it will cause some sort of civil war type of situation, because when the children of Esau and Ishmael, meaning the Christians and the Muslims, would shake their hands, they would surely kill us openly. So they should never allow that the Christians and the Muslims befriend each other. So they need to create some sort of division between them.
Is a term used to describe 1 million tons of TNT. 1 million tons of TNT is a megaton. Now, our nuclear bombs had a capacity of 10 megatons, 10 million tons of TNT. That was when they were first developed 5 or 6 years ago. Now, the nuclear bombs that are being developed have a capacity of 200 megatons. And God knows how many megatons the nuclear bombs that the Soviet Union has have a capacity. So, what do we face now? If we trigger a world war that may develop into a nuclear war, humanity is finished. And why will it take place? It will take place because
Yo,
Act
Lean,
3,
what's up, man?
the curtain goes up on Act 3. Act
I'll
1
make you mod
was
real
World
quick.
War I. Act 2 was World War II. Act 3 is going to be World War III.
So this guy is Jewish, don't forget, he's just letting the humanity know the plot. So Act 1 is World War I, Act 2 is World War II, Act 3 is World War III. And all the 3 acts have been laid out before the first act has even started.
the Jews of the world, the Zionists, and their co-religionists everywhere are determined that they are going to again use the United States to help them permanently retain Palestine as their foothold for their world government. Now that is just as true as I'm standing here, because not alone have I read it, but many here have read it, and it's known all over the world. Now, what are we going to do? This life you save may be your son. Your boys may be on their way to that war tonight, and you don't know it any more than you knew that in 1916 in London, the Zionists made a deal with the British War Cabinet to send your sons to war in Europe. Did you know it at that time? Not a person in the United States knew it. You weren't permitted to know it. Who knew it? President Wilson knew it. Colonel House knew it. Others knew it. Did I know it? I had a pretty good idea of what was going on. I was liaison to Henry Morgenthau Sr. in the 1912 campaign when President Wilson was elected. And there was talk around the office there. I was confidential man to Henry Morgenthau Sr., who was chairman of the Finance Committee, and I was liaison between him and Rolla Wells, the treasurer. So I sat in these meetings with President Wilson at the head of the table and all the others, and I heard them drum into President Wilson's brain the graduated income tax and what has become the Federal Reserve, and also indoctrinate him with the Zionist movement. And Justice Brandeis and President Wilson were just as close as the two fingers on this hand, and President Woodrow Wilson was just as incompetent when it came to determining what was going on as a newborn baby. And that's how they got us into World War I, why we all slept. Now at this moment, they may be planning this World War III, in which we don't stand a chance, even if they don't use nuclear bombs. How can the United States, about 5% of the world, go out and fight 80 to 90% of the world on their home ground? How can we do it? Send our boys over there to be slaughtered for what? So the Jews can have Palestine as their commonwealth? They've fooled you so much that you don't know whether you're coming or going. Now, any judge, when he charges a jury, says, gentlemen, any witness that you find has told a single lie, you can disregard all his testimony. That is correct. I don't know from what states you come, but in New York State, that is the way the judge addresses a jury. If that witness said one lie, disregard his testimony. Now, what are the facts? The Jews, I call them Jews to you because they're known as Jews. I don't call them Jews. I refer to them as so-called Jews because I know what they are. If Jesus was a Jew, there isn't a Jew in the world today. And if those people are Jews, certainly our Lord and Savior was not one of them. And I can prove that. Now what happened? The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world's population, of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia. And they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe. And to reduce this, so you don't get too confused about the history of Eastern Europe, they set up this big Khazar kingdom, 800,000 square miles.
So this is very important so you understand. This kingdom is Jewish just because they took the religion later. But it's not like Christianity or Islam where you can just convert into Judaism. The real Jews have blood ties to the Israelites. That's why the Israelis are not allowed to do DNA tests in Israel. It's because they are not real Jews. They are just these Europeans. That's why they look European. They are just Polish and stuff. And when they would allow the DNA test, then this whole lie would just collapse. In reality, they are goys also, but they don't know.
Only there was no Russia, there were no other countries, and the Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe. So big and so powerful that when the other monarchs wanted to go to war, the Khazars would loan them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. Now, they were phallic worshippers, which is filthy. I don't want to go into the details of that now. It was
So, in the details of that is that they did some sort of human sacrifices with children, where they, and I get, like, immediately my stream turns off when I say this normally. Yesterday I tried, I got turned off, but I showed, like, adrenochrome and stuff. Maybe that was the reason. But apparently they have a deity called Moloch, and they sacrifice children to that deity. It is a statue, and in the bottom is like an oven. And then the act of this sacrifice is called Holocaust. And it means a burnt offering. And that's where this word comes from.
It was their religion, the way it was the religion of many other pagans or barbarians elsewhere in the world. Now the king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, the Muslim faith, or what is known today as Judaism, really Talmudism.
Mr. Freedman's address will be continued on the second recording, along with a question and answer period between Mr. Freedman and the audience.
Now the king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, the Muslim faith, or what is known today as Judaism, really Talmudism. So, like spinning a top, he said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and he picked out so-called Judaism. And that became the state religion, and he sent down to the Talmudic schools of Tel Aviv and Surah, and brought up thousands of these rabbis with their teachings, and he opened up synagogues and schools in his kingdom of 800,000 people, 800,000 square miles, and maybe 10 to 20 million people, and they became what we call Jews. There wasn't one of them that ever had an ancestor that ever put a toe in the Holy Land, not alone in Old Testament history, but back to time, the beginning of time. Not one of them. And yet they come to the Christians and they ask us to support their armed insurrection in Palestine by saying, well, you want to certainly help repatriate God's chosen people to their promised land, their ancestral homeland. It's your Christian duty. We gave you one of our boys as your Lord and Savior. You now go to church on Sunday and kneel, and you worship a Jew, and we are Jews. Well, they were pagan Khazars who were converted just the same as the Irish. And it's just as ridiculous to call them people of the Holy Land as it would be. There are 54 million Chinese...
What made this Jew expose his people? There has been Jewish people in the past that tried to snitch on their own people, but they always get like either killed or something bad happens to them, and then like it's in the bin. But yeah, it's a choice, you know, to do all of this, to go with this narrative, to try to enslave humanity willingly, knowingly, to witness 9/11 and know that this is from you, know Mossad has done it, know that you are trying to frame the fucking Muslims on terrorism so you can fuck the Palestinians in the long run. This requires a very psychotic type of people. So he resented it. I can work with someone like him. If someone asked me, yo, Medusa, would you ever be able to be friends with a Jew? I could be friends with him.
Muslims, 54 million. And Muhammad only died in 620 AD, so in that time, 54 million Chinese have accepted Islam as their religious belief. Now imagine in China, 2,000 miles away from Arabia, where the city of Mecca is located, where Muhammad was born, imagine if the 54 million Chinese called themselves Arabs. Imagine. Why, you'd say they're lunatics. Any man that believes that those 54 million Chinese are Arabs must be crazy. All they did was adopt as a religious faith a belief that had its origin in Mecca, in Arabia. The same as the Irish. When the Irish became Christians, nobody dumped them in the ocean and imported from the Holy Land a new crop of inhabitants that were Christians. They had Christian flesh and blood. They weren't different people. They were the same people, but they had accepted Christianity as their religious faith. Now these pagans, these Asiatic, these Turco-Finns, they were a Mongoloid race who were forced out of Asia into Eastern Europe. They likewise, because their king took the...
To be honest, Arabs consider themselves also true Muslims, though deep down. Yeah, but you know what the thing with that one is? That one is just human error, you know? Because Islam doesn't say that, like, when you're Muslim, your level as a Muslim is higher when you're also coincidentally born as an Arab. Your level in front of God depends on your character. So you can be a Jewish Muslim. You can be a Thai Muslim. It doesn't matter. So when they have this, like, oh, we are the Arabs, then that's just like this, like, human error type of thing.
In Spain, if the king was Catholic, everybody had to be a Catholic. If not, you had to get out of Spain. So everybody, they lived on the land just like the trees in the bushes. A human being belonged to the land under that feudal system. So they all became what we call today Jews. Now imagine how silly it was for the Christians, for the great Christian countries of the world to say, we're going to use our power, our prestige, to help repatriate God's chosen people to their ancestral homeland, their promised land. Now, could there be a bigger lie than that? Could there be a bigger lie than that? And because they control the newspapers, the magazines, the radio, the television, the book publishing business, they have the ministers in the pulpits, they have the politicians on the soapboxes talking the same language. So naturally, you'd believe black is white if you heard it often enough. You wouldn't call black black anymore. You'd start to call black white, and nobody could blame you. Now, that is one of the great lies. That is the foundation of all the misery that has befallen the world. Because after two wars fought in Europe, World War I and World War II, if it wasn't possible for them to live in peace and harmony with the people in Europe, like their brethren are living in the United States, what were the two wars fought for? Did they have to, like you flush the toilet because they couldn't get along? Did they have to say, well, we're going back to our homeland and you Christians help us? I can't understand yet how the Christians in Europe could have been that dumb, because every theologian, every history teacher knew the things that I'm telling you. But they naturally bribed them, shut them up with money, stuffed their mouth with money, and now I don't care whether you know all this or not. It doesn't make any difference to me whether you know all these facts or not. But it does make a big difference to me. I've got in my family boys that will have to be in the next war. And I don't want them to go and fight and die like they died in Korea, like they died in Japan, like they died all over the world. For what? To help crooks hold on to what they stole from innocent people who had been in peaceful possession of that land, those farms, those homes, for hundreds and maybe thousands of years? Is that why the United States must go to war? Because the Democratic Party wants New York State, the electoral votes, Illinois, the electoral votes, in Pennsylvania, the electoral votes, which are controlled by the Zionists and their co-religionists, the balance of power. In New York City, there are 400,000 members of the Liberal Party, all Zionists and their co-religionists, and New York State went for Kennedy by 400,000 votes. Now, I don't blame Mr. Kennedy. I'm fond of Mr. Kennedy. I think he's a great man. I think he can really pull us out of this trouble if we get the facts to him. And I believe he knows a great deal more than his appointments indicate he knows. He's playing with the enemy. Like when you go fishing, you've got to play with the fish. Let him out and pull him in, and let him out and pull him in.
So this indirect speeches of JFK with the global conspiracy, he tried to like tease the Jews a little bit, okay? But the problem was he was too aggressive with the plan of fucking their nuclear program, because their nuclear program is needed because of one of their prophecies, actually, where it says they have like some sort of Samson option. The man's name was Samson. He was the guy that fled his enemies into the second temple, I think, or first. I forgot which one it was, but it was the Solomon's temple. And Samson then broke down the pillars and make the whole building collapse on him, but he took everyone with him. And symbolically, this means that when Israel is under the imminent threat of not existing anymore, it launches the nuclear weapons all around the world. It's so fucked, bro. It's not even like this is like in hiding or something like that. You can just Google it. It's the Samson option. It's real. They use that to blackmail the entire earth to say, if you don't help us and we go extinct, we take you with us.
But knowing Mr. Kennedy's father and how well informed he is on this whole subject and how close Kennedy is to his father, I don't think Mr. Kennedy is totally in the dark. But I do
And then when you think about it, who created the atomic bomb that they need for the Samson option? Einstein is Jewish. He gave the equation, but he stole it from someone. That is a different story, but we get into that maybe one other day. Then the person that uses the equation to then create the atomic bomb is Oppenheimer. And that guy is also Jewish. Do you understand the law of this world, slowly?
Think that it is the duty of every mother, every loyal Christian, every person that regards the defense of this country as a sacred right, that they communicate not with their congressman, not with their senator, but with President Kennedy, and tell him, I do not think that you should send my boy or our boys wearing the uniform of the United States of America and under the flag that you see here, our red, white, and blue, to fight there to help keep in the hands of thieves that which they have stolen.
You have to read the Elders of Zion HK. Their gaslighting tactics are written down, you know, with oh yeah, we have like interesting distractions, and then put this into our messaging into the media and replace the world leaders with our own, and all these things they have laid out, they have written it out, they are just applying it like a divine script on how to control humanity. And then they have something called the Zohar Kadosh, and that one reads like a war manual to take over the Gentile nations. It's just fucked.
I think everyone should not alone write once, but keep writing and get your friends to write. Now, I could go on endlessly and tell you these things to support what I have just asked you to do, but I don't think it's necessary to do that. You're above the average group in intelligence, and I don't think it's necessary to impress this anymore. But I want to tell you one more thing. You talk about, oh, the Jews. Why the Jews? Christianity. Why we got Christianity from the Jews. And the Jews gave us Jesus, and the Jews gave us our religion. But do you know that on the Day of Atonement that you think is so sacred to them, that on that day, and I was one of them, this is not hearsay. I'm not here to be a rabble-rouser. I'm here to give you facts. When on the Day of Atonement you walk into a synagogue, the very first prayer that you recite, you stand, and it's the only prayer for which you stand, and you repeat 3 times a short prayer, the Kal Nidra. You enter into an agreement with God Almighty that any oath, vow, or pledge that you may make during the next 12 months, any oath, vow, or pledge that you may take during the next 12 months shall be null and void. The oath shall not be an oath. The vow shall not be a vow. The pledge shall not be a pledge.
So do you understand this religion? They pray that they are now for 12 months, like each year, that whenever they say something they can lie, when they pledge to something they can lie, they are completely free from any moral things. It's just not normal, bro. What kind of religion is this?
They shall have no force and effect, and so forth and so on. And further than that, the Talmud teaches, don't forget, whenever you take an oath, vow, and pledge, remember the Kal Nidra prayer that you recited on the Day of Atonement, and that exempts you from fulfilling that. How much can you depend upon their loyalty? You can depend upon their loyalty as much as the Germans depended upon it in 1916. And we're going to suffer the same fate that Germany suffered, and for the same reason. You can't depend upon something as insecure as the leadership that is not obliged to respect an oath, vow, or pledge. Now, I could go on and recite many other things to you, but I would have a little respect for your time, and you want to really get through with all this. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Now, I want to say one thing. You ask me, well, you think to yourself, well, how did this fellow get mixed up in this the way he got mixed up in it? Well, I opened my mouth in 1945, and I took big pages in newspapers and tried to tell the American people what I'm telling you. And one newspaper after another refused the advertisement. And when I couldn't find a newspaper to take them, I paid cash, not credit. What happened? My lawyer told me, well, there's an editor over in Jersey with a paper. He'll take your announcement. So I was brought together with Mr. McGinley, and that's how I met him. So somebody told me, the lawyer who introduced me, who was the son of the dean of the Methodist bishops, he said, well, I think he's a little anti-Semitic. I don't know whether I can get him over here. So he brought him over to my apartment, and we hit it off wonderfully.
So they accused a Jewish person of being anti-Semitic after he started to speak out about his own people. And then he just revealed what they tell about us in the Talmud. And when you look into the Talmud, it says that when a Jew tells about what they think of us, then it's like you kill them all, because the humans will turn against them and kill them openly. It's just so fucking crazy once you find out the real story. But anyways, now it's pretty late, and slowly I have to sleep. But just for the people that really understand that this is all true, so you are not like in a negative state and oh shit, we can't do anything and stuff. Unfortunately, World War III is gonna happen. That is the bad news. Like, it's written, it can't be changed. In Islam also, we wait for it. It's called Malhamat al-Kubra. In Christianity, it's called Armageddon. That is definitely gonna happen. When it's gonna happen, obviously no one knows, only God knows. But there will be a good time as well in that time, apparently. There will come like a person that is gonna wake the people up and lead them or something. He's like the guided one. And he is the person that comes right before Jesus. But at that time, unfortunately, the Antichrist arrives as well. So it has good and bad things. Anyways, yeah, okay, you know what? You can have a bad mood. It's gonna be shit. Good night.